Hello and good evening. We're back with you this evening. Before we go any further, a really big happy mixed race Irish Day to you all this evening. When we think about Irishness, we think often about how that is portrayed, what people think when they think about Irish people. And often those notions come from what we see in all the media that's around us. And when I think back, I think about my early days of watching things on stage, watching things play out. Most people know that I work in the theatre, and so I am massively excited to have with me today an incredible playwright, Coburn Gray. Now, Dylan, you've been working with the theme of Irishness in lots of different ways of recent. So can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm Coburn Gray. I write collaboratively with a company called MALAPROP and then sort of solo under my own name. And I think sort of when I look back on maybe the last 3 or 4 years in particular, most of the stories I've wanted to tell have touched on, I suppose, the full spread of Irishness and Irishnesses and what those are and what those can mean. But actually in ways where it's been really difficult to actually stage the stories that I'm really interested in staging, sort of because sometimes, you're looking for actors where you feel like there isn't a fit for a story or the other way around, which is you've got a brilliant actor, but you don't know quite what show you'd love to make with them. And actually, I think what I found generally is that the most interesting thing to do is to get the people first and then to reverse engineer the project from the people, and to start maybe from the question, who is it for, rather than who is it. And sort of for the last 2 years in particular, since sort of middle of 2019, I've been working on this big project, which is sort of about I suppose, I think in the broadest sense, what I'd say is the adoption system, institutions and sort of the experiences of racialized people within that, and sort of how that touches on lots of things, but I think with adoption at its core. And the working title of that show is Absent the Wrong. But I sort of thought, in order to prove that it's been a long time brewing, even though now I'm sort of working with a brilliant team and everything, it might be nice to start off by sort of showing a short form work I had a chance to make at the start of last year as part of the Abbey's Dear Ireland programme, which was sort of coming out of lots of the thinking and research I was doing for this project. And I think actually looking at that is nice because it's concrete, and it sort of gives us lots to talk about. So
yeah, I'm excited even to hear some of the things that you're saying, Dylan, because I completely buy into that. I think that, when we're thinking about theatre, it really is about that interaction of people and thinking about that, because we all make that together. Anyway, listen, let's watch the piece and then we'll chat about that when we're done. I'm actually going to pop us off the screen just so that we can see this in all its glory.
I'm seeing someone really nice now, who I don't feel bad asking for things because mostly I don't have to. Last year I had the flu, and when I told him, he said, "I've had the shot. I'll bring you some stuff. Let me know if there's anything you want." And that was what I wanted, as well as 2 cream eggs, which he didn't comment on. But I feel like I matter. I don't know if I was missing that feeling because I can't remember if I've had it before. It's been a while since I've had people to ask for things. It's like that, isn't it? Always is just the same thing twice in a row. Like I'm an actor and it's always the same, or the same is always. But day 2 of the tour, you're like, what home, what family, what boyfriend? I have never not lived in this hotel room and eaten too many boiled eggs for breakfast, which is why everyone cheats on each other and breaks up and gets together with someone else until the next tour. It's not that you forget you have someone back home, they just don't feel real. Real life is just routine. My last one, it was classic. He said, "I wish I told you the truth sooner." Which was wild, because if you're wishing, why not, "I wish I hadn't lied to you"? Why not, I wish I hadn't had the secret other girlfriend to lie to you about. The cliche was more hurtful than the lie, I think. Bit of a... I can't believe I have to spend time feeling feelings over this thing. But I do it too. A while back I said to someone, I wish my mum had lived until I was 20. And what I meant was, I wished I'd had her for all my teens. I wished I'd had her for college. I wish she'd seen me graduate. I don't think I want kids, but maybe I would have wanted some if she would have gotten to meet them. But why didn't I just say, I wish my mum was still alive? Because in this world, I didn't even graduate when I was 20. So I'm already imagining that if she was still alive, I would have done more education sooner. But maybe if she was still alive, I would have taken her for granted and fucked off to Australia to work in a bar and never call her or graduate at all. So, last winter, I'm on the 39, and this family get on, 3 of them, 3 generations, kid, mam, nana, and the nana is real dark, Somali looking, and the mam looks like my mam, lighter but no question, and the kid looks like me. White Brazilians are going to be really nice to her, except she's got all these women around her. So she's not going to need hair advice from strangers or early 2000s YouTube when she's 16. Not going to shave her head and find out the look is less skin from Skunk Nancy and more French woman who fucked a Nazi. Lucky bitch. And the nana looks at me and says, it's so cold. It's not that cold. But I smile and say, fucking freezing. And the kid goes, oh! And her mum and her nana are sound about it, but I'm mortal. So I look out the window and I see the 4 of us sitting together and I think, we could be a family. I don't wish for it, but strangers looking at us might think it. If I did wish for it, I'd have to wish that my family wasn't my family. But I'm used to that, because my mum was adopted, so I can't wish I knew all my family without getting rid of half of them. But there's no way not to wish, and there's no way not to regret the wish. In the next year or so, she's going to be gone longer than I had her, and I'm the youngest, so that's true already for the others. Maybe I didn't just say, I wish my mum was still alive, because it feels like asking for too much to change. As though if I wish for less, I might get it. My partner's white, so if we have kids, they'll be white. Like, white. Maybe that shouldn't bother me, but it does. That they won't understand. I could wish that he was black, or Korean, or black and Korean, or black and Korean and Irish. But that would probably mean his mum would have been adopted like mine. Probably poorer. And he'd be someone different, with very different feelings about the police. The Gardaí not staying on the lads, but also staying on the lads. I could wish that my white kids would understand that my dad had been black, so that my kids wouldn't be so white. That my black granddad got to stick around. That all the black granddads got to stick around, so there were more black families on the north side in the 60s. So that fewer people had to feel like the only one. So that fewer people were the only one, and the black ones they loved died. I do wish the nuns hadn't hated black children so much. Hadn't left them in dirty nappies until their skin wet. Hadn't left them by open windows. Had given them funerals. But if I wish for that, why don't I wish for no nuns? Why don't I wish for only ever desired adoptions? Why don't I wish for abortion in the Constitution? Maybe because at a certain point, the wishes start to feel like suicide. If we got all that, we'd be someone else's. My family wouldn't just not be my family. I wouldn't be me. None of us would be none of us. I do wish the virus doesn't kill the survivors before the stories get heard. Some people would love that. And I try to remember to wish that the stories get heard, that they get believed, that none of it was true, that we lived in a world where none of it happened, like so many old people still say, that someone else in some other world are happy because they were safe. But I can't see it. And that's part of the wound, that we don't know what to wish for. I think about the last one, with his secret girlfriend, and it's like I was drunk the whole time. Because who was I that I put up with all that? Someone who thought that was all there was. I couldn't see the way from there to here, and now I can't see the way from here to there. I wouldn't have believed there was one if I hadn't walked it.
Dylan, that is so powerful. Talk to me.
Really nice to watch it again. And probably it's important to say that actually when the Abbey got onto me to sort of say, is this something you'd like to be involved in? My first thought was sort of, yeah, but I really want to work with Leah because we go way back. We're went to the same primary school. My dad taught Leah. And our families were sort of friends. And then I sort of think in that funny way, which is only when we were like 17, 18, sort of had this conversation where we were like, oh, our family backgrounds are weirdly similar. Our grandfathers are both medical students who came to Ireland to study and had children with Irish women who were adopted through that system then and everything. And in that funny way where you've been friends with someone for years and years and you never realize that you have this thing in common. And then you go, oh yeah, that's a scream. And so I think lots of that was sitting in the background then in terms of, you know, what we wanted to get at with the piece. Was it, yeah, but was there anything you wanted to ask there?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, Leah's she's the perfect person to perform that piece. Dylan, I mean, and this is kind of off topic in some ways, but you know, I work in the women's sector. And actually, we've been having all these conversations recently about who can write for who. And I just felt myself watching that and thinking about how well you write for a female character. Tell me about that.
God, that's one of those things that people say that just fills my heart with fear. Because in that way where when people say you're doing it well, you're immediately like, oh God, that means it's going to be all the worse when I get it wrong. But I don't know. I sort of feel like the thing about writing that way is sooner or later, I think if you want to really engage with the complexity of the world around us, you have to write beyond your experience. And the way to do that is to just cultivate listening as a practice. And so sort of there was a real back and forth in that. Obviously helped by the fact that me and Leah know each other really well in real life. But the really nice thing to do is to sort of talk and to say, I think I'd like to go here. What do you think about that? And actually then to, I suppose, sort of arrive at the overall shape from, you know, sort of the back and forth, and Leah sort of going, I think this is really interesting, or this really resonates for me, this not so much. And, you know, then even on a, you know, like a really cynical level, I'm sort of a bit of a brain explodey playwright. I'm always interested in 15 things at once. So actually even collaborating with other people helps me turn 15 things into sort of like 3 things. Particularly if the play is only going to be like 3 minutes long or 10 minutes long or what have you, you know? So it's good to sort of tailor the thing to the people who it's for, both in the sense of who's performing it and who's going to be interested in it.
So I'm going to ask you, I just want to ask you some questions about your process. But before I do that, I'd just like to invite anyone that is watching to just pop a question in the comment box if you've got a question for Dylan. But I was going to ask about your process. So is your process of writing, like, do you devise? What's that process for you? Particularly because I know you're quite into collaboration. So talk us through that.
I mean, I think maybe an important thing to say up front is, I think sometimes people fetishize collaboration because they feel like it means they don't have to make choices. But in that awful way where actually collaboration requires so much more talking through things and sort of leadership. It's just that actually there's way more room for, I suppose, leadership to shift from person to person throughout the process. I think sometimes, in the name of democracy, people come into devising and sort of going, which is, well, you say whatever you want to say, and then you say whatever you want to say, and you say whatever you want to say, which actually does people a disservice, because it doesn't sort of look at a way of bringing experiences together so that they can, speak to each other, and then I suppose sort of work together in that way. And so it's that thing of, I don't know, I sometimes think, I remember reading this thing a while back about how pirate captains were in charge, but pirates used to vote on where the ship went. And so actually it wasn't like you had a dictator in charge. The captain's job was really just to go, let's all decide together what we want to do. And then my job is to stand and look over all of it and say, you need to sort of pull in time with this lot, and you need to turn that and put that sail there and everything. And I sometimes think leading a devising process, the most frustrating thing for participants is if you set it up and if you say, come work on my thing, and then you refuse to make any choices, because then they're like, come on, you brought me into this, and now you're telling me that it's up to me to turn it into something. So actually, I sort of think you do have to sort of take the lead, which is not the same thing as not listening, if that makes sense. But beyond that, so in some ways, I sort of think the way I approach devising is that it's your job to provide a structure or an overall theme or thought that you can sort of slot people's individual contributions into in a way that sort of makes them more than just the sum of their parts, if that makes sense. And sort of in terms of what the structure is for this bigger piece that maybe we're going to look at some excerpts from in a minute, I think it started maybe with like that overall vision, and then me sort of going, I think there's enough in this that it would be really good to do something large scale. And actually where that came from was end of 2019. I was working on playing quite a different territory. It was sort of with the language staff at the Nuremberg trials. But really interestingly, that was all about justice. And more than that, it was all about reparations and the idea of making things right. And actually sort of, and obviously it was also hugely about Jewishness, and something I found out, in the research for that project was this really interesting fact that I think of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism is the only one where there is no provision for blood money. So I think traditionally in, sort of Jewish law, you can't make things right after you've killed someone by paying a fine. Unlike in Christianity or Islam. And I sort of think that says something really interesting about the nature of loss and the nature of extreme loss in particular. And it really cuts to the core of like, is justice about the past or the future? Because, if it's about the past, it's about restoring someone to position they're supposed to be in if you hadn't done the wrong thing that you did. And if justice is about the future, it's sort of about saying, well, there is no recovery. That thing is always going to have happened. I think murder particularly brings that into focus. And I suppose from there, that felt really resonant, maybe for the Irish context, in terms of institutions, and particularly, I think, for racialized people, because there is just all of this weight of history. And I felt that was a big enough frame that you could fit all sorts of experiences into it. And I was like, I feel like maybe this is a show for 10 people, which is sort of the team I'm working with. If that's a useful example, Lorraine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going back slightly because I like the image of you as like the pirate captain, the captain of the pirate ship. I quite like that imagery. But it is really an interesting take on things, and actually writing for 10 characters is quite a big job. It's like that's no small feat by any means. I'm just even thinking about the rehearsal rooms and the challenges of that, particularly during COVID times. It is a tall order, but I think, talking about the subject matter, that evokes so much even in me, because when I think about, today being Juju's birthday, and Jude grew up in that system, born and grew. Now, I know, he always talks really eloquently about all the opportunity that he's had in life. But Jude, alongside like hundreds of other people, they know that they suffered at the, because of the color of their skin within those institutions. And so it feels quite insulting to see a commission that says that racism didn't exist within those institutions, because we know that there's still such structures that don't quite work right. So if we know that structurally within a country that racism exists, then surely the institutions within that country, that there will be some questions to answer. So it's great to see pieces like the piece that you're working on, Dylan, because it's reminding people and it's keeping it in the forefront. Well, when we think about just the sheer numbers of women in Ireland, and I'm talking of women of all colours, actually, the sheer numbers of women that went through those kind of systems, and actually as a country we're never going to forget them. And when you think about the shame that was put on those women, as a country we should be feeling some of that, because they did, some of them actually, none of them did anything wrong. Let's just put that out there. Like, none of them did anything wrong. And some of them will have been sent to those horrible places, for the smallest of things. And we just think like, that's not just an Irish story. Everybody across the globe needs to know that story, because we know that there are so many people, particularly in America and Australia, that will come from Irish ancestry that will have been sold off in that time. And there's no evidence that there was money transacted, but we know that there will have been these big endowments that were given to particular institutes for housing these children and the mothers. Anyway, I could get completely passionate and go completely off book in thinking about that, Dylan.
I mean, there's a few things to pull on there, which I think are really good ways into talking about process, because one of them is, I absolutely agree. And I think because of everything you said, facing into this project, again, I want to draw a distinction maybe between the desire to work with a team versus the desire to actually just have those people up on stage and sort of be people who are traumatized and affected by the subject matter we're talking about, and to just have them, I suppose, uncritically represent that on the stage. I think sometimes that's a form of making which appeals more to makers than it does to audiences, because as an artist it feels good to be close to authenticity. It feels like that guarantees the insightfulness or depth or profundity of the end product. But then you sort of have to think about the ethics of what you're asking people to do, because I think sort of when you take that up close perspective, practically with performers, sometimes if you take that really close-up perspective on sort of dysfunction, trauma and racism, you're sort of asking people to just sort of relive it. Particularly when we're talking theatre rather than film, it's, you have to do it every night. You have to say those words every night. And again, it's good to just have that clarity that, definitely art making can be therapeutic. It's also not therapy. And sometimes sitting into things that way, maybe it's good for audiences. I'd still have question marks over that, but I think it can be quite anti-therapeutic lots of times for the people involved. And again, just to gesture towards sort of like the real complexity that, as part of sort of my reading in this territory and everything, I was doing that Saidiya Hartman book, Scenes of Subjection, a little while back, about sort of the ironies of, how we consume, particularly Black trauma. And she makes this real head melter of a point about the fact that artists with the best of intentions making worthy art about Black pain are actually sort of just perpetuating a system in which Black lives are available to the white gaze. And I sort of think that's a thought that once it's been put to you, you have to take seriously. So So yeah, I suppose sort of thinking into that, what that meant was working with a team doesn't mean you stand on stage and just, or at no point in the process am I going to bring people in and say, tell me about the worst thing that's ever happened to you, or tell me about your family story. Because I sort of think it's good to leave room for people to offer that stuff. You'd never want people's involvement to be predicated. And actually, I think the much more interesting thing is, rather than come together and confess together, the thing is to say to your team of performers and artists, let's come together and let's think together. And I suppose, if you're not going to go for the super, documentary and close-up approach, what are you going to do? And interestingly for me, sort of, I sort of think that's a reason when you're the leader, the pirate captain, who's sort of bringing people together to think. And then when we decide on a heading, I sort of think it's up to you to bring propositions or provocations to the table. So I sort of think the early stages of a process for me before I get a team is I read really widely, sort of all over the map, things that may or may not be relevant, because actually sometimes it's the things that are oblique or off kilter that actually really unlock something. And in this case, even though I knew I wanted to write about adoption, I sort of wanted to start somewhere else to see if that would bring in interesting perspectives. And at the same time as I was starting to work on this, I was working on a MALAPROP show about climate change called Hot House. And someone had recommended to me, which I have written down here, as this academic book, Alexis Shotwell, Against Purity.
Mm-hmm.
I hold this up just in case anybody wants to check it out. And that was really interesting because I think, like lots of sort of popular success academic press books, it's sort of the most provocative phrasing of much more interesting research that's been done by other people. And I was reading it for the climate change angle, but there's a chapter in it because Shotwell is in Canada and working in a Canadian context about the Truth and Reconciliation process that Canada went through for their residential schools, and which in a similar way is all about the intersection of Indigenous people's experiences with sort of this sort of violent approach to the institution of the family and the enforcement of the family that they had, which has lots of echoes for Ireland. And I found that really, really valuable, sort of as a slightly sideways but thing to get me thinking about that chapter in Irish history. And so like I was saying, which is, it's the provocative version of more interesting research, because there's been so much written, I think, about these collective wrongs and how we sort of deal with collective wrongs and make collective wrongs right, and sort of what justice looks like for them, which I sort of think is the question for the overall project I've landed on, is not just how do we get justice, but in the case of sort of these big collective systemic wrongs, what would justice even look like? And that sort of feels like a good artistic question, because it's an act of imagination as much as anything else. But yeah, to say that Shotwell is sort of quoting more interesting people, I think it would be wrong not to name those people, because the discussion sort of how reparations has worked in the Canadian context, she ends up quoting from this Indigenous scholar, J. Kehaulani Kauanui's book, Hawaiian Blood. Again, I just like to hold these up because I enjoy reading so much, and I want other people to have the chance to too.
Dylan, what we can do actually, and it's really great that you're giving those recommendations, because we really need them. You can send them to me, and we'll make sure that they're within this. This chat is going to stay up until Friday. So any information that you want to put, we can put on this chat, and anyone that wants to watch or wants to check back can have a look on there tomorrow, and all of that will be there. And we will put it on our website after Friday, so that people will have it. Dylan,
but,
I want us go on.
Really quickly finish that talk, because I've sort of taken us all around the world, but I've nearly managed to link that up with the Irish context, because what you were saying, I suppose, about the Mother and Baby Homes report as, notionally part of our response and notionally part of doing justice in this situation, and why it falls short. I think the reason that book, Hawaiian Blood, is so good is because that writer, they are talking sort of in quite a lot of detail about the US government's rule in Hawaii and the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act 1921, which was sort of this framework that allowed for Hawaiian identity, and the fact that Hawaiians were a people with particular rights who needed particular forms of care and particular forms of, sort of resources. But But the problem is that whenever something is legislated for that way, you introduce this burden of proving that you count as Hawaiian in the eyes of the US law. And this comes up so much in redress processes, which is you end up imposing this sort of paperwork burden on precisely the people who don't need to spend years and years of their life dealing with the law, who don't need to spend time being told that their pain or like proving that their pain is real, and in the process being made to feel like their pain isn't real by people who are asking them insulting questions. And so I sort of think that's a really, really good book length exploration of sort of the really, really painful ironies that are attendant on, I suppose, asking a state that we know to be unjust for justice. And I sort of think that really leads back to the themes. Which maybe is a good place to start looking at, what we actually have. Is that what you're going to say?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. So let's pop it up.
(1955).
April 3rd.
Mary Ann Robinson.
Patrick Kelly.
Sligo.
Kate Quirk.
James Rooney.
St. Patrick's Home.
Mary Fowler.
Christina Mitten.
Hollow Street.
Margaret Moyers.
George Kidd.
Connolly.
Jane Dalton.
Mary Dalton.
The names match.
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean...
She wasn't married, no. But I'm not a girl.
Oh.
Yeah. Have you tried the Mormons?
Why?
Up in Glasnevin. They've moved from Eccles Street, bought a big place.
Why would they have anything?
It's not just knocking on doors. They go in the archives, the young ones. Photocopy parish records, birth certs.
Of people who were Mormons?
No, parish records.
Oh, yeah?
But they want to help. People say they're very helpful.
Why?
Are they helpful?
No, or they do it more.
Haven't a fucking clue.
Whenever I prayed, I always said a prayer for you.
I know you're being sweet, but that's not comforting.
Well, it's true.
But I'm the one who looked, who had to go looking for you.
But they told us not to.
Who?
In the office. We went in. They said you were settling in with your new family, and did we want to go upsetting everything?
But I wasn't.
You weren't happy?
No. I was never adopted even. Sorry I'm late.
You're not.
But were you waiting?
I prefer to be a bit early and get a table.
Looks like they're leaving if the window was more, if you'd prefer to be further from the loo.
This is better for me, actually.
Okay, of course.
Not to. I've some health problems.
Okay.
Sorry if that's embarrassing.
No.
I speak my mind.
I'm jealous.
Gets me in trouble. My ma used to despair.
Yeah.
Puts everyone on edge, she'd say.
I'd rather you said.
Yeah?
That you're comfortable while we talk. It's a big conversation, this.
And here we are, straight into it.
Are we?
All this goes back to me staying there while I had you.
Oh.
Do you want to order something?
I'm all right.
Because I have a pot of tea coming.
I'll just get a glass of water when it comes.
We could share, I mean. They're big.
Oh. You enjoy your tea.
I think it's lovely here. But the stairs are murder.
The windows are gorgeous.
I saw the Coors once, over there.
No way.
They're even better looking in the flesh. And he's worse.
I believe it.
And I saw herself, the young one.
Who?
She's black.
A famous person?
The singer. She did that song that was in the ad for car crashes, and she was in the panto there.
Oh.
With her brother.
Samantha Mumba.
That's her.
And Amira.
She always made me think of you.
Yeah?
Might be why I suggested here.
Might be.
That's probably wrong.
Which?
Saying she reminded me. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry you're not well.
You managed.
Still.
What I've always said is, I heard him say I needed stitches and I never got them.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry if that's hard to hear.
I don't want you to worry about upsetting me.
Well, it is upsetting. And it's your life as well.
But I don't remember. And you do.
There's that. 1960.
Dublin.
Christ the King.
Mary Jane Fagan, May 14th.
Dublin.
The Most Precious Blood.
Elizabeth Gillick, July 16th.
Ferns.
Horswood.
Thomas Pender, July 23rd.
Kildare and Loughlin.
2 Mile House.
Ellen Hannafy, August 13th.
Armagh.
Holy Family.
Dennis Early, August 13th.
Ferns.
Our Lady's Island.
Margot Tatterson, August 13th.
Great name.
Tatterson?
Also, what are the chances?
Of what?
3 in a row, August 13th.
This is baptisms, not birthdays, though.
Oh, yeah.
They do them in batches, like.
Oh, yeah. Dublin.
St. Mary, Help of Friends.
Rosanna Kenna, August 27th.
I think this is me.
Yeah?
Right birthday, right place, baptised on a Saturday.
So, is that a photo of your mother?
I don't want to get my hopes up.
But if that's you, if she was from this parish, doesn't that mean...
I said I don't want to get my hopes up. Have you tried the Mormons?
Why?
In Glasnevin, they've really good records.
Of people who were Mormons?
No, everyone.
Why?
Wherever they go, they do big family trees so they can baptise their ancestors and be together in heaven.
What?
Their ancestors, who died before there were Mormons, because it's so new.
Right.
Mormonism. They baptised Anne Frank a while back there.
Fuck off.
And 400,000 other Jews who died in the Holocaust.
Fuck's sake.
So, they might have your original birth cert.
Is that allowed?
I don't know, but it's true.
And there's all this history we're never taught. Like, it's not all trochra ads, skinny kids with flies in their eyes, which is way to the east anyway. West Africa had all these huge kingdoms for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Ashanti, the Ganja, the Humi, and even before them, the Mali Empire, the Ghana Empire, which lasted nearly as long as Rome. And you never hear about it.
Mad.
Well, except the country's named after it, actually.
Okay.
But people don't know. Did you know that?
No?
I went myself.
Oh, yeah?
Saved up, but flights were mad. Ended up going as a lay missionary.
You have faith?
Do you?
I won't mind if you don't, if that's why you're asking.
I just wanted to see it. But it's gone downhill.
Since no more kings, you mean?
Since the Brits, more like. But you can't blame it all on them.
No?
It's gone mad commercial. Like what I'd say America is like. Money, 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 street stalls everywhere. People shouting at you all the time, just go, 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 non-stop. Everyone cramming into these dinky minivans like an under-18s hurling team. But they're all strangers. Trotros, the vans are called. And they fucking peg around. Sorry.
I'm shocked.
Sorry.
Never heard language like that before.
No.
I'm only messing. They fucking peg around.
Yeah. Million miles an hour. Dude, you're not trying to drive. And there's beaches. But at night, people just squat and shit right there in front of you on the ones that aren't private.
Private beaches?
Yeah, for white people and American blacks, yeah. And that's the worst thing, is everyone thinks you're American.
Your accent, was it?
Because I was working with white people more. Getting paid white money. Which to the locals is what?
Loads.
Shitloads. And I'm lighter than them. And there's this tree word, obroni, yeah?
Yeah?
Means white person. Person who comes in and wrecks everything, like we talk about the Brits. But I'd hear lads calling me a brony right to my face. They didn't fucking care if I knew.
Was there anything good?
About the place?
Or that you came away thinking about? I'm glad I came because this happened.
I stopped biting my nails.
Oh, yeah?
Because they kept serving us this pepper soup. And when you dip the fufu in it, it stung like, you know...
Fucking bejesus.
Yeah. Down the pub the other week, some prick starts in about the rich Ghanaians, the kings and them. They were the ones capturing poor Africans to sell to the Europeans. Turns to me, looks me straight in the eye and goes, "What do you think of that, my Nubian friend?"
That's cruel.
It's a fucking load of bollocks is what it is. It's not true. That's him just wanting to get the Brits off the hook so he doesn't have to feel bad about himself.
He's English.
Or he's Church of Ireland, basically the same.
Right.
Because when you look at history, When you study, like I've studied, you see the way it always goes. Bosnia, Rwanda, the Jews. It's wherever there's a big majority and a small minority. But all the African kingdoms were multicultural all the way back, all different cultures mixing. The Akan, the Hausa, the Fon, the Mandinka. There was never a majority that way. Everyone was different, but everyone was related.
Right.
So I said to him, people turn on their neighbours, maybe, but not their families.
You went to college.
No,
You said you studied.
I can read, and there's libraries, is what I meant.
Ah. When the time came to make the choice, I hoped that it meant you'd end up with people who could send you to a good school, that you'd have a degree.
My brothers are white, are they?
Your half-brothers are, yeah.
Aren't they all?
Which?
Aren't they all my half-brothers?
Joseph isn't.
So, sorry. You and my dad had another baby.
We were married by then. Could you hold on a sec?
Of course.
Sorry,
Not a bother.
getting the dinner on the table.
I won't keep you so.
Can I ask why you're calling?
Nothing urgent. I was a friend of your sister's when she worked in Dublin. I was hoping to catch up with her.
Is this about the baby girl?
Sorry?
Because she didn't have any friends back then.
Oh,
She'd say so herself.
right.
So is it?
About her baby?
Her daughter. Yes.
Yes. Hello? Hello?
Dylan, that is just so powerful. I feel like I need a minute to digest before even responding.
Yeah,
Really.
I mean, all I'd say to start really is just Noel and Kwaku are fantastic. They're just such gorgeous performers, and I sort of think that's one of the things I love about working with people, and specifically in the performing arts, is that you just you write something and then actors take it and make it better than you could have allowed for. Actors do a very hard job.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they were actually really perfect as well, weren't they? They were perfect in those roles. Dylan, I think this is probably a good point to tell people that we are going to do a workshop in a couple of weeks. Where's my diary so I can remember the date that we worked on? I think it's the 24th of May. It's a Monday evening. So we're inviting people to come to a workshop with Dylan, where we'll kind of look at Dylan's process and the themes of Irish. And what feels nice is that this will be a real opportunity for some kind of collaboration. And we're inviting those who would identify as being writers and those who would identify as non-writers. Dylan and I had a bit of a chat about this beforehand because I write things down, but I don't see myself as a writer. And I think lots of people that we've met throughout this process write and create some really powerful moments. Dylan, we're actually running out of time, but there was a question that someone asked that I think if you could just answer it, and it was from Tanya, and the question is, I mean, there was a couple of questions, but I'll ask you this one. How do you find balancing different projects? Tanya is currently working on a few different things and feels like their head is busting. Have you got any tips?
Oh, God, I'd love to say yes, but I sort of feel that's just sort of I don't know. I sort of think with the multitasking, I'm sort of the wrong person to ask because I love having a couple of things on the go because, I love that vibe of being able to, whenever you're stuck on one thing, jump sideways to another. But I think key for me, if you can, is to sort of try and leave yourself 6 weeks of intensive work at a time on one thing, because I sort of think it's a bit like tab hopping, which is if you have your email open here and if you have your play open here and if you thing over here and you're just cycling between them every 20 seconds, you feel like you're kind of working on all of them, but you're not really getting anywhere. And then usually I know when I get into that sort of brain fried headspace, I only really start getting work done when I step away and like fold laundry or make lunch or something, and then come back when I've had like time to sit and think. And so I think actually that the way to multitask is not actually to be working on everything all the time, but to be doing like alternating intensives. So to boil it down to 2 words, alternating intensives. I sort of think that's how it works for me. But again, I don't know other people's methods or if that works for everyone.
Sounds like good tip.
Maybe just one of the things to say on the workshop, Lorraine, as we're wrapping up, is just that, to talk about the form of those scenes, because they're sort of fragmentary, which I think for this specific project is sort of thematic, because, I felt like it couldn't just be about any one person's search, because that's part of the problem with the way things are, which is you can get really lucky. My family were really lucky, which is my mom was born in St. Patrick's Home and was adopted through St. Patrick's Guild. And I think sort of found it relatively easy to get info until we hit a stone wall, because no one knows my grandfather's name. And so in that sense, you lose the big picture, which is that it just depends so much on the luck of the draw if you don't sort of hop between stories. But also that's part of the process, which is, for a workshop, I generally try to bring little bits of fragmentary text to the table for us to, like, going back to what I was saying about think together about. And so I think for the workshop, I'd love to do something like that, which is, and it really isn't about sort of feeling like you're a writer who's a really good literary head. I think it's more about wanting to be in that room and wanting to be there, having those conversations and seeing what actually people unexpectedly have in common or unexpectedly are all really passionate about. Or alternatively, the one thing that one person is really, really obsessed with and no one else is, and you're like, oh, I never knew you could be obsessed with that. Those moments are also brilliant. So that's sort of the vibe of the workshop when we do it. I'm really looking forward to it.
And I'm really excited about it too. So in the next couple of days, we'll have something up. It'll be on our website and probably on our Facebook page. Do sign up, and we really look forward to seeing you then. Dylan, thank you so much for bringing your creativity, your generosity, your vulnerability, and your amazing work. Thank you so, so much for being here with us today.
Cheers, Lorraine.
Thank you for tuning in to Irish Roots. Irish Roots is a completely volunteer-led festival. If you can donate, please do. For more information and to see what else is happening, jump over to our website. It's www.iamirish.org. From all of us at I Am Irish, Gurav Mila Mahagut.